you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say, what's one thing I'm doing wrong, that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? You meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one. When you're trapped, some of it's your own inadequacy. What you can do to begin with is every bloody thing you possibly can do to put yourself in the most virtuous and powerful negotiating position possible. Wherever I go in the world, people come up to me and they often have a pretty rough story to relate. It's an awful thing because you see, even in the revelation of their triumph, the initial depth of their despair. So I wouldn't change that. But it's not nothing. It's certainly not just happiness. It's better than happiness, but it's almost unbearable.
Quick one. Can you do me a favour if you're listening to this and hit the subscribe? It's that Jordan Peterson, the man himself, all the way from Canada, came here to sit in my kitchen and have a conversation with me. And what a conversation it was. One of the most moving moments in the history of this podcast takes place in this conversation. And I think the thing that people love about Jordan Peterson is his unrelenting desire to just say what he believes to be true, not what he believes to be correct, not what people want to hear, not what people will be happy to hear. And it's because of that, it's because of his pursuit of truth, that he's managed to change millions and millions and millions of people's lives. That is absolutely no understatement. So without further ado, I'm Stephen Bartlett, and this is the Diary of a CEO. I hope nobody's listening, but if you are, then please keep this to yourself. I feel like I owe you a debt of gratitude, and I want to say thank you for the impact you've had on my life. And I'll point at the specific impact you've had on my life. And you asked me before we started recording why this podcast had been successful. One of the reasons is actually something I've gained from reading and listening to your work, and that's this real commitment to trying to be your true self and trying to be your truth. This podcast wouldn't be successful, and I wouldn't have been successful in terms of pursuing myself had I not understood the importance of truth across all facets of life and in my relationships, which was a real pivotal thing for me. And that's thanks to
So what's changed in your relationships as a consequence of that?
So I believe it's really difficult to truly connect with someone if you're not speaking and being your truth. And I wasn't. I think I was wearing a mask in my relationships in the context of I didn't express how I was thinking and feeling. I was trying to be who I thought my partner wanted me to be. And at the point when I let down the mask and I started speaking my truth, actually as I was departing from the relationship got stronger than ever before. And it was like we were never actually connected until I was being true with her, with my feelings, with what I wanted, with my life. And since then, I would categorize my relationship as being the strongest thing I've ever seen in terms of a romantic connection with someone.
And so when you were starting to talk in your relationship in a more truthful manner, what did that mean that you had to admit? I mean, you just said that part of it was a disconnect between who you were trying to be and who you really were. So that's a persona issue, right? So you think maybe, and everyone has this proclivity to some degree, is they're deeply self-conscious and uncertain. And so instead of allowing the person they're with to connect with that underlying uncertainty and inadequacy, they act out a persona.
Yeah.
And then the problem is that, well, perhaps the person falls in love with that persona, but there's no real connection there. It's an artifice. And, you know, having said that, one of the things that Carl Jung, the great psychotherapist, said about a persona is, don't be thinking that you're better off if you never formed one. So for Jung, it was a voyage from, say, undifferentiated self in infancy and so forth, through persona to authenticity, because you have to act out your ideals to some degree, right? And you also have to formulate a avatar of yourself in some sense that's a mediator between you and other people in casual social encounters. Like, you don't want to walk into the bank and have the teller tell you about his or her day when you say, "How are you doing?" Right? I mean, now and then that can happen, but generally it's too much intimacy too quickly. And so you need this functional shell. But the problem arises when that functional shell is all that there is. And then the real person underneath is just desperate and unhappy because nothing of what's being acted out reflects a true underlying reality.
What is the consequence, the long-term consequence of acting? So many people, especially because of the world I live in Instagram and social media, we kind of build out these personas and then we almost follow the implicit instructions that come with those personas.
Well, that's the problem right there, is that, that I'm trying to get a hold of the Disney people at the moment because I want to do a lecture series on Pinocchio, because I think Pinocchio is a brilliant work of art. And if you're a puppet and an actor, and Pinocchio is both at times in that movie, both a puppet and an actor. So why an actor? Like, why is there something wrong with being an actor? Well, the first question is, well, who sets your role? And then the second question is, who's pulling your strings? So you've put on this front that is there to make you popular and sexy and desirable and to mask from yourself your own inadequacies. But that's a role. Well, who wrote it? And for what purpose? And so Jung said, for example, that we all acted out a myth, and whether we knew it or not. And, maybe you're acting out a tragedy. Maybe you're acting out Narcissus. You don't know, because you've put that on yourself in an attempt, in some ways, to deliver to people what they want, or more accurately, to look as though you're delivering to people what they want. And it's not nothing to do that, right? Because at least you're attempting, in some sense, to adapt to the social world. Someone who's really infantile and dependent, someone who's never left home, part of their problem is that they haven't crafted a persona. So you don't want to denigrate it entirely, but it's no substitute for the real thing. And it turns out that not only is what we want from each other the real thing, but that's also the adventure of your life. And so if you aren't truthful, and that means, unfortunately, especially at the beginning when you start to be truthful, it means deeply coming to terms with your inadequacies in humility. So it's very painful. Without that, you don't have the adventure of your life. You have the role that you've acquiesced to. And that'll take all the meaning out of your life.
The adventure of your life. You say, imagine who you could be, and then aim single-mindedly at that. Mm-hmm. I encounter these young people who appear to know who they could be, or they've imagined who they could be, but for whatever reason, they seem to choose the certain misery of their current situation, the job that's sucking their soul out, or that relationship, over the uncertainty they'll encounter as they go on the adventure of their life. So what would I say to these young people who always say to me, Steve, I want to do this, but you can see them stifled by fear, because it's like...
it's like, make a plan, man. So when I was doing my clinical work, which I did a lot of career work with my clients, both at a beginner level, I would say, like really a beginner level, with people who had no employment whatsoever, no history of employment, who were undereducated and who lacked every skill you could possibly imagine. So these were people who were really in dire straits, up to people who were operating at the top of their profession, but who could still strategize forward. And so, for example, let's say you're at a dead end in your job. Okay, so I don't find my work meaningful. All right, so that's a problem statement. It's like, well, why not? I find the work I do repetitive and boring and without spirit. I have a bad relationship or a neutral relationship with my boss who doesn't know who I am. I have problems with coworkers. All of that needs to be differentiated, right, and analyzed in detail. So we might say, for example, let's say you believe that you're undervalued at work, and maybe you are. What you need to do is you have something to say, and we would have to figure out what it is that you have to say. But it would be some variant of, I'm bringing more value to the table than I'm being compensated for, and that's demoralizing me. And it's also not good for you being my boss, because if I'm actually more valuable than is being recognized, then the fact that you're not valuing me properly means that I will become demoralized, I won't work properly, and you won't get the best out of me. So it's bad for both of us. And if your boss is in principle not amenable to such a discussion, then what you should seriously consider doing is finding another job. Okay, so let's say we're going to set you up for this. Okay, this isn't like next week's enterprise, man. This is your life. So the first thing I would ask is, well, do you have your resume or CV in order? Well, I haven't typed it up for 3 years. Well, what do you think about bringing it up? Well, I'm pretty nervous about that because there's some holes in it, and I didn't do so well in college, and I'm kind of embarrassed about my resume. It's like, okay, bring it in. Let's go through it. Let's at least update it. Let's look where the holes are. Let's look at where the inadequacies are as far as you're concerned, right? This isn't my judgment, it's your judgment. Let's walk through those judgments and see if they're warranted, because maybe you're just too guilty and ashamed and self-conscious and anxious, and you're looking at your resume more critically than someone else would, and maybe there's some holes that you need to rectify. You were 2 courses away from your BA and you dropped out or something like that. Well, maybe we need 6 months to address that. And at least, even if you can't be fully educated, you could be taking some courses online. And so when you went to a new job interview and they said, what about this hole? You'd say, well, I came to terms with that 6 months ago, and in an effort to rectify it, I'm taking the following courses, and here's my plan for completion. That's a really good answer. And anyone with any sense who's interviewing will accept that as an indication that although you're not perfect, and who is, that you have a good plan and that you've thought it through. Like, that's the kind of answer that in all likelihood will cement your candidacy for the position. Okay, so now you're going to go to your boss. Well, you have to have your CV and your resume in order, and you have to be able to stand on it solidly, and which at least means that you're prepared to address the inadequacies in a credible, realistic, believable, and truthful manner. All right, now what you do is apply for like 10 jobs. You don't have to take them, but maybe you have to go to an interview or 2 or 3 or 4, and maybe there's a bunch of opportunities out there for you that you didn't even know about. And maybe someone offers you a job. And so now you can go to your boss and say, here's the situation I'm in here at work. Here's my evaluation of the problems in relationship to me. Here's what I could do for you if you gave me a 40% raise and the opportunity to progress, but I'd like to see a plan for that. And I've been looking for other opportunities before conducting this discussion, and I have some. Well, then, if your boss treats you with contempt at that point and doesn't listen, then perhaps he or she is a little more narcissistic than might be optimal, and it's time to find a new job. But this isn't something you do trivially. And so when you're doubtful, say you're trapped, you ask yourself, well, why am I trapped? And that's a hard question, right? Because some of it's your own inadequacy, a lot of it. And all of the part of it that you can deal with is your own inadequacy. So even if it's unfair, even if you're hemmed in for any number of reasons, inappropriate, like ethnically predicated oppression, let's say, or maybe you're in a workplace that really is sexist in some fundamental sense. Well, that's not good. It's not just. It's not fair. It's not meritorious. All of those things. Man, maybe you shouldn't be there. But what you can do to begin with is every bloody thing you possibly can do to put yourself in the most virtuous and powerful negotiating position possible. And you have to think like a snake in some sense to do that. You got to get the details right. You have to be prepared to bite, and you have to have your eyes on the prize, so to speak. And people aren't taught this sort of thing ever, really. They're not taught how to negotiate. They're not taught how to goal set. They're not taught how to conceptualize appropriate success in some broad sense. In some sense, that's what the humanities are supposed to teach people. So,
on that point of understanding my inadequacies or someone's inadequacies, I really believe that it's really difficult to undergo self-development if you don't have self-awareness. And I was really trying to understand from your writings how someone is to build their self-awareness. It's almost like the unknown unknown. If you don't have it, how do you build the thing?
I know a good exercise for that It's like a prayer in some sense. In fact, I would say it's proper prayer. If you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say to yourself, you got to mean this. Like, you got to be desperate. This is no game, this. It's like, my life is not everything I want it to be, and perhaps it's not everything that I need it to be. And by need, I mean my life is so unbearable that the suffering that's attendant upon that is make me nihilistic, cynical, bitter, resentful, homicidal, genocidal, unable to have a good relationship, prone to punish people for their virtues because of my jealousy, driving the proclivity to see evil everywhere except within my own heart. Like, these are problems, man. And you ask yourself, you sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm ready to learn something. Like, what's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? It's like, you meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one. You know, and it's often something that will point you to small things. So Carl Jung said, people in the modern world don't see God because they don't look low enough. And so imagine you're in your messy bedroom, you know, and you're sitting on the edge of the bed trying to have an honest dialogue with yourself. And the little voice says, you know, it's pretty disgusting in here. And you think, well, I'm way above such trivial niceties as organizing my room.
The best way to do that, what he's talking about, is writing to yourself. If you write to yourself and you know that you're going to tear it up, it's a pretty amazing experiment, actually. Jordan, I'm surprised you didn't mention this in any of your videos yet. You cannot lie to yourself. If you know that you're going to be the only one to read it. So what happens is you start out the first paragraph, you start writing, and you're writing about yourself. You're writing your own biography, telling yourself about yourself. Just like he's explaining now about sitting on your bed and talking like that. But instead of using your thoughts or even verbally to yourself, you're going to do it in writing. Because when you read it back, you cannot lie to yourself. It's very difficult. I wasn't able to do it. And when I heard this for the first time, I didn't believe it. I thought it was stupid. I'm like, that's dumb. I mean, that's dumb. I mean, if I'm the only one that's going to read it, then why am I going to even write it and that kind of thing? And how is that going to make me be honest with myself? And he told me, he's the guy that told me this, and he said, because you can't lie to yourself when you're writing. As long as you know that you're going to tear it up, burn it, so keep an ashtray right there. It's kind of fun thing to do. And you each page that you write it, and you just immediately burn it. And then write your next page, and write your next page, and you're writing your own biography as you burn each page. But what was amazing was that he was right, because you write the first paragraph, but you have to be honest with yourself. You can't lie to yourself. And when you start writing and you read it back to yourself, you're like, wait a minute, that's not actually true. That's something I would say to everybody else to make myself feel good or look good to everybody, but it's not really true. So you burn that one, and then you or throw it away or whatever, and then you go to the next one. Now this time you make it 2 paragraphs, and then you go back and you read it again, and you're like, actually, no, that's not really true either. And then you're like, okay, well, if I'm going to be honest with myself, no one else is going to read it. So then you tear that one up and you throw it away and you start again, and you get maybe through another 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs even. And then you tear that one up, and then you're like, oh, okay, I see where he's going with it. But it's much more emotional than that, because once you start doing that, for example, I mean, I was in tears. I was ruining pieces of paper because I was crying all over it about how bad I am, you know, what a terrible motherfucker, man, really bad. So I beat myself up, but you also get over it and you come out at, you know, I guess maybe don't do this if you're in the wrong state of mind, I guess. But I was in the wrong state of mind. I went to a therapist, and he told me to do this. It was I was stressed out over work. I had a lot on me. And he was a really good therapist. I didn't have to go to him very many times to get out of that bubble that I was in. You know, he did it pretty simple, just using child psychology on me. So, you know, I was stressed out about work. So what would happen if you just, why don't you just take a couple of weeks off and you'll relax? Take a couple of weeks off? What are you kidding me? If I don't show up there tomorrow, this ain't going to happen, that ain't going to happen. I got 4 guys coming in to do this. I got 2 guys coming in to do that. I got the cleaning girls coming in. I got security staff, blah, 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 blah. And I got a meeting with the manager. I got a meeting with the fucking regional manager. I got that, 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 that. I got to go over there and meet with these guys. I got to, and then he's just waiting for me to finish. I'm like, so how am I going to take 2 weeks off? Okay, so if you took 2 weeks off, what do you think is going to happen? What's the big deal? Tell me what exactly would happen. You know, okay, well, I'm not going to die. I'm not, I mean, I guess, I don't know, I guess they would just fill in for me and they'd find somebody to cover. It was like that fucking easy. Right? And you're like, they would probably find. So if you went to your boss and you told them, hey, I'm really stressed out, I'm wired, I need to get away. I've been working 60, 70 hours a week here and then working another 30 hours a week over there. I'm juggling a girlfriend and cars and all kinds of life shit going on. Just bought a house. So you know what? I can't handle it. I need a couple weeks off. And he's going to say, okay. You know, it's no big deal, right? Like, yeah, I guess so. You know, and you think everything's going to fucking fall apart without you. So he was good in that sense. And he was also the same guy that told me the advice that sounds almost like what Jordan is saying here. And when I tried it, it worked so good. I mean, you could not lie to myself. I would give you exact examples, but I don't even know what this video is at. Let me see. I don't want to waste my time. Then the video gets cut off. 21 minutes. So I'd start off writing first paragraph, if I remember it all correctly, about, you know, of course, how good I was. Because I was kind of like this guy here, where I had my fake persona thing going on. And I think that I'm not going to keep interrupting the videos every time everybody says something I don't agree with, because then I'll never get to hear anybody else. So I got to let the thing play through. But what this dude was just saying about the personas, yeah, I believe everybody would do that, right? I mean, the sad part is people don't grow out of those fake personas. It also, you're getting people under the false circumstances. You make friends under false circumstances. You make girlfriends and acquaintances and everything under false circumstances. So I don't agree that it's as good of an idea as Jordan might think it is. I see a need for it growing up, but it's kind of the same thing you were saying about the little children. If babies were allowed to be babies and children, I'm positive, I have no doubt, they would be able to see everything it is I'm trying to show you. They would be telling their parents, but we don't give that a chance. We poison them, we indoctrinate them, we feed them the fucking poison. We give our kids the shit and the lies that make up this human concept, the entire thing, including intelligence, what we call intelligence. So it's unnecessary to do that. We can let them have reality. Why don't we all go back to reality? Stop using the imagination to live by. It doesn't work. If it did work, then it doesn't work for everybody. Let's put it that way. It works in the favor of a very few people. Everybody else are like puppets on a string, man. It's crazy to watch. So the persona thing, you know, I was starting to say about writing to yourself. Yeah, so when you're putting on these fake personas, you even lying to yourself. That's the same thing I did too. I still do. I have to catch myself and stuff, and I get it. But at the time, I didn't get it. So when I was writing to myself, what was it now? Okay, so I'm so helpful, and I was a very helpful person. But when I really looked at it, it wasn't because I was a good person. It's because I always wanted things in return. So if I was helping somebody, there was usually some underlying factor or something I wanted from them. If it was a girlfriend, it could have been sex. If it was a family member, it could have been money. If it was, or a connection. Connections were always a big one that I remember. I kept finding, like I'm good to all my friends, and it would be a line, and then I have to tear it up and say, actually, I'm good to my friends. I'm good to this one, I'm good to that one because they connect me with work. And then I'm good to this one and that one because I'd like to get in their sister's pants. This kind of thing, right? Or whatever the case may have been. And so by the time you keep tearing it up, and you're like, all right, I really got to be honest with myself. Finally, you get done and you wrote 3 or 4 pages of total honesty about who you really are. Yeah, it's a total meltdown. It's a nervous breakdown, and I would imagine for everybody. But I made it through. It was, maybe I brought my ego back right away so that I would not stay a defeated, crushed person. Maybe there was some denial that I was moving on under a new light from all the wisdom I just gained, but really I hadn't. So maybe I was in denial. As a matter of fact, I'm sure there was partly part of that I was able to move on from that. That's the mirror neuron and the mirror neuron manipulator that I keep trying to bring into the subject. And that mirror neuron manipulator allows us to take more from life than what we need, and that may sound like dramatic, but more from life than what we need could be the most minor things. And there are so many billions of things that we have all been lied to about, and we all continue to lie to each other about and lie to ourselves about. I mean, billions and billions of things. And many of them are very important. They really are. Going over to LED lights, for one example, the LED lights coming out of this computer right now, they've been fucking killing me. They've been killing all you. And you're all still watching them. My speakers got LED lights in them. My computer box got LED lights. Right now I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screens with LED lights facing me. If I go outside in the street, I got LED lights on me. The LED lights are not a good light to be even using for humans. We're changing it over. We're going over to be more synthetic. These lights are more generous to synthetic creatures and even carbon creatures than they are to humans and biospecies. And it's not all about the Ks or the watts or the K values and everything, which is important because there's oranges and reds and yellows that we should be more or less using rather than these whites and blues. We've been using a lot of white and blue for the last 25, 30 years, switching over to all whites and blues. Think about it this way. Do you like those blue lights coming at you when you're on a fucking highway? No, they're aggravating, right? They bother your eyes and everything. But nobody likes them because they're not good for us. And there's a natural instinct that our eyes are telling you, hey, don't even look.
Professors, 7, which is really good, who really love to teach. And so I also learned a lot in the formal sense. But while I was doing that, I was also negotiating, well, how much partying do you actually do? Because 0 isn't the right amount. But every goddamn night till 3 in the morning isn't the right amount either, because you have to balance that in some sense with practicality and upward striving. And so, and how do I live with other people, my roommates? So I had one roommate who's a really good friend of mine still, and he walked 1,000 miles with me this year when I was ill, literally. So I really liked living with him because he was a tough guy, worked in lead smelters, and he was a cowboy, and he was a tough guy, 4 years older than me, about 3 years older than me. He'd come back to school after bouncing around through these like tough working class occupations, and he had his feet on the ground in lots of ways. And I really liked him as a roommate because I'd buy some groceries and then he'd buy some groceries, or I'd make dinner and he'd make breakfast. And none of that was ever explicitly negotiated. He was just very aware of this reciprocal altruism, technically. He was very good at we were both good at tracking our mutual obligations and fulfilling them. So we had a very peaceful relationship. I lived with him for a year and then a little bit at different times and in different places. And I learned to live with a whole variety of roommates. I had many roommates. We had a kind of a frat house in the first college I went to, and I think anywhere from 6 to 20 people lived there depending on the week, you know. It was ridiculous. It was way too much fun. And that was also a problem. But when I look back on that time in my life, I certainly can't reduce the educational experience to virtual classes and virtual tests. Maybe that's 10% of it. And we don't know how to replicate those environments that are so formative, especially in their everydayness, you know, because you live with your roommates. That's a 24-hour thing. And so the problem with virtualization is that we don't understand our environments well enough to be certain that we're not excluding something vital when we concentrate only on what we think conceptually is important. Now, I meet with my son pretty regularly for a project we're working on, which is an app that will teach people to write while they write and use it. So we're quite excited about this. But I meet with him.
I was talking to the guy about the Catholic Church. I mentioned in an earlier video that I wanted to interview him. So I didn't take any cameras with me or anything, but it is worth mentioning. So I think I might have mentioned it in another video the other day, actually, too, a little bit. But I want to talk about it more. Just in case that video, I don't even know if it made it up. So I was talking about someone close to me. They don't like being involved. No one I know likes being involved in my video stuff. So I can't name anybody's names just out of respect. But anyways, he was talking stories about the nuns and how bad they were in the church and how they used to beat them, throw them in the closets. Not just him, but other kids too. But he got really the shit end of the stick. It was a crappy time back then. I mean, there was a lot of fucking assholes. It seemed like there was more assholes when I listened to these guys talk then than there are even now. As far as it, and that was what it seemed like a good era. You know, the 60s, growing up and being a little kid in the 60s, you would have thought would have been a little bit better than now. You know, I always got the impression that the 30s were the better time and the 40s and everything, but when we were coming out of the Depression and that kind of thing, and self-inflicted depression, by the way. But I would have figured that. But listen to these guys, I don't know about that. You know, even the 60s don't sound like a lot of their friends were real assholes, did mean things to animals. I'm finding out from this guy, because the person I'm talking about is going to be, he just got a death notice of cancer. So he don't know how much longer he's got. You know, they figured 6 months to a year, and that was already a year ago. So he's been talking more and sharing more about his life, and good and bad. You know, but I've been pumping him probably for more bad than good, because I'm asking him about the nuns and stuff like that. So anyways, I mistakenly over the years figured that there was a nun story that he wasn't telling us, and I thought maybe it had something to do with being molested or something. And I'm still digging. I'm still looking for that story to see if something like that happened. But he did let out with another one the other day, and I maybe heard it when I was a young kid or something, him mention it, but this time I got more details out of it. So anyways, the nuns, Catholic Church, of course, you know, fucking idiots, you know, beating the hell out of the kids and stuff. And on one hand, the nuns are beating the kids, and the priests are molesting the kids for 70 fucking years or more. Ridiculous. Anyways, yeah, that's your God. That's your Christ. Anyways, so they brought all the nuns. I'm sorry, the nuns brought all the kids, all the students, one day to one of the nuns' funeral. The nun died. So they went to the wake and the funeral, and at the wake, they all the kids had to go up there one at a time, and they would say a quick prayer, or whatever, not a quick prayer, but say a prayer for the nun, and then you were supposed to touch her hand and walk away. So when it was this person's turn, they went up, kneeled down, made believe they said a prayer probably because they probably didn't even know a prayer, and then said a prayer, and then got up to go touch her hand and didn't touch her hand all the way. Well, when he went to turn around, the nun that hated him, one of the nuns that hated him, was right behind him, and said, "Kiss her, kiss her." Right? He was very emotional about it, so I shouldn't laugh about it. It's not really funny, but anyways, she's like, "Kiss her," and he's like, "Huh? No. What do you mean?" And then she's like, "Kiss her." You know, she gives her with her mean voice. This is the way he told me the story. Anyway, who knows? Maybe she sounded like this. I don't fucking know. But what she did was really cruel. So she took his head and forced him down onto the fucking corpse and made him touch his face. He wasn't going to pucker his lips and kiss her, but she bumped his face into a corpse's face of a nun that he didn't even know. No one ever did. No one in the class knew who she was. She was from another school or whatever, you know. I said, wow, what a fucking bunch of assholes, you know. So everybody let this stuff go. So at the time, things at home were so bad. That's why I'm saying back then was so bad. But things at home were so bad because his old man was beating the hell out of his mother all the time. He was in the middle. He had brothers and sisters too and everything. But back then, it was like every other door. And then, you know, depending on where you lived, let's put it that way. But probably not even, because even the upper classes and everything like that, just because they didn't get the cops called on them, didn't mean they were beating their wives. They're the wives who were the ones showing up to tennis with sunglasses and never taking the sunglasses off for the next 3 days. You know, make sure she got her tennis racket in her hand, so she always looks like she's got a reason to wear sunglasses. Anyways, well, what a bunch of assholes, though, you know, to do all this stuff. And then now here we are. Again, this is what I'm saying about going from religions all the way down. So the priest, we went to priest, right? We all had to look up to the priest for a long time, hundreds of years. They give us our heroes, you know? And these people are just humans. We don't need any other human to be in touch with the true creator's work, the false creator's work, or the creator's work. The only thing that humans have to do with are other things of human influence. We just think that they're natural. We think that it's nature because we were programmed to think that. So we call it nature. It's all nature. No, we have a lot more control over this. We, meaning all of us. For some reason, no one wants to see it. No one wants to look. Been arguing with people for the last fucking, I don't know, years now, but the last 3 days they've been really getting me. All right, let's see what this is all about. Oh, he's selling his product. All right.
Pharmaceutical companies, I think they have a hard job, both in terms of research and development and marketing and sales. And they're going to do what they can to market and sell. But that doesn't mean that they are now
These are the clouds, by the way. That's
that's
the garage door.
Politicians
There's
are
an
too
antenna for a
cowardly
car.
and incompetent
Looking at the clouds.
to do anything but devolve their
This is a day that
responsibilities
you
to
would
so-called
hardly even
experts,
see
domain
it. I'm
experts.
adding the filters
Politics
for you
is not
so that you can
public
see the
health.
imagery.
That's medicine.
Which is good because it's
politics is
you don't have to crop
the
it as
art
much,
of
you know, because
analyzing
it's
the
not
entire
so
situation
full.
and charting
It's
a
not
course
so
forward, all
collage
things considered.
because of the type of
And
day
for
that it is.
politicians to trot out the experts and say
I would
follow the
say it's
science
probably
just
day
means that
2
they've
of the
abdicated their
trailing
own
of the mineral
responsibilities.
street.
And I think it's appalling. I mean, I'm not convinced that the evidence that masks work is scientifically credible. It's certainly at least doubtful.
We went from a
And that's
silvery
just
blue
masks.
sky over to
I
a
read a
silver
paper the
sky.
other
That's what
day
we look at
suggesting
today
that
is the silver sky.
prevent the transmission of
Silver
one
and gray.
case of COVID, you have to lock down 1,000 people. Like, how is that justifiable? Especially given that the mortality rate of COVID is actually quite low, unless...
I can't say anything about that. Even saying that word on my channel gets my videos deleted.
diseases.
I wish I would have caught that.
And with regards to, let's say, the issue of child vaccination, it's like children have an unbelievably tiny chance of dying from COVID. I don't think there's any scientific justification for immunizing children under 12.
Just got another, just got an argument about that myself.
And I'm not a domain expert, although I'm a decent scientist and I know how to read the research material. And so, well, we'll see what we have to learn from these tectonic shifts underneath. And, you know, you might ask yourself, well, was that a tectonic
They
shift?
want to freaking vax kids.
Dire physical
1 to
necessity
5
because
now.
the
It's
COVID
crazy.
virus was genuinely so dangerous? Or was it an indication tectonically of our absolute inadequacy in the face of even a moderate existential challenge? And maybe it's a little column A and a little column B, you know? So
I have to ask the question. If we were to make your Jordan Peterson the president of the world and these were your decisions to make, do you know what you would have done differently or in response to this virus emerging in Wuhan?
I would say, well, thank you for the offer, but I declined the position. And the reason I would say that is because I think the right solution to the most serious problems is to be found at the level of the individual. So I don't think if I wanted to pursue what I regarded as the ultimate goal, the ultimate goal for me is the encouragement of the individual. And that's not essentially a political enterprise. It's essentially a theological enterprise. And politics has to be subordinate to that. And so I've debated throughout the entire course of my life whether I would adopt a political career. It was my initial ambition when I was very young, 14, I would say. But when push came to shove at every decision point in my life, if I had to choose between working on the encouragement of the individual and pursuing a political career, I always chose the former. And that's happened every time the decision has come up. I've been approached by people in Canada to involve myself more deeply in a practical role, and also publicly as a political figure, but I'd rather do what I'm doing. I'm in contact with people working politically all the time, both on the people in the middle, people on the right, people on the left. I'm agnostic about that because I know full well that conservatives have something to say and left-leaning liberals have something to say. That's basically predicated to some degree on their temperament. So conservatives tend to be more conscientious, so that's orderly and industrious, dutiful, patriotic, willing to make and keep verbal contracts, reliable, capable of implementation at the level of detail. So that's kind of conservative virtues there, but they tend to be lower in creativity, openness to experience. They don't think as divergently, and their conscientiousness tends to constrain their creativity. Whereas the liberal types, they're high in openness to experience. That's the creativity dimension, but they tend to be lower in conscientiousness, particularly orderliness. And so what that means is those with a liberal temperament tend to be creative/entrepreneurs, and those with a conservative temperament tend to be managerial and administrative. That doesn't mean they can't run businesses. Well, you want a conservative person to run your business. You might want a more liberal person to pepper you with off-the-wall ideas, you know, and then if you're going to run an enterprise, business, or a society, there has to be a continual dialogue between people of different temperaments so that we can keep the ship of state, let's say, tracking to an ever-moving destination. That's why free speech is so necessary. It's not another right. It's the right. So, because none of us know what's going on in the final analysis, because the future is different than the past, really. We have to talk about what to do all the time. Because even if we made wise decisions in the past, that doesn't mean that we can mindlessly replicate those decisions right now in the present to deal with a changing future. So I want to help encourage people to become the sort of people who can engage in that free dialogue. And I think that's the best way forward, especially as we all become more technologically powerful. It's like, you better be smart enough to use your iPhone. And that's pretty damn smart, let's say wise, because that's no trivial gadget. And if you're not careful with it, it will turn on you.
It just dumbs us down.
We'll build authoritarian presumptions into our artificial intelligence systems, for example. Mm-hmm. And then look the hell out. So if you're going to have a hydrogen bomb, you better be wise enough to wield it.
That's why we got to throw them all in the garbage and stop using it. Go back to the old stuff.
On that point of the encouragement of the individual, we all have people in our lives that we want to encourage.
We hope.
Yeah, we hope, right? And we sometimes fall foul of trying to force our own bias, our own intention for them on them. What is the best way? If I've got a friend in my life or a partner that I want to encourage to come out of their place of despair into a better place, how do I effectively do that without overpowering them or stifling them or making them feel inadequate, which is sometimes the consequence of trying to change someone you love?
Well, example's good. But then I would say disabuse yourself of the notion that you know what is best for this person. You don't, not only do you not know, you actually don't want that responsibility for two reasons. Let's say they do what you say and something good happens to them. Well, whose victory is that? Yours or theirs? And if it's yours, did you just steal it? And then let's say they fail following your advice. Well, they pay the price for that. And you can skip away merrily and say, well, I should have spoke more carefully. It's like, you don't mess about with people's destiny. You do not know where they're headed. Now, having said that, you do what you're doing in this interview, in this podcast. You ask people questions, real questions, like, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm not doing so good today. Well, what's up? What's going on? And you can't think, well, I'm going to ask questions to lead this person in a particular direction, because that's the same game, the same instrumental game. You have to see what it is that you want to know. I see this when people ask me questions after my lectures, Now and then, or during a Q&A, now and then people get up and they'll ask a real question. It's part of the ongoing dialogue. Something struck them. They stand up. There's something they really want to know. It's an honest question. And that goes real well. But not infrequently, someone stands up with a little prepared speech that's packaged as a question. So I get this from Christian traditionalists fairly frequently. They get up and they ask me about my religious convictions, but really what they want to do is corner me into admitting that I should accept Jesus Christ as my Savior and join a particular, let's say, denomination.
Right.
It's not a question. It's just a manipulation.
Yeah.
And so your questions, like your statements,